Hi there and welcome back to another episode at Station Road. Now today I finally begin the very long awaited extension to the Station Road layout. Now I went back and had a look when I first mooted the idea of this extension, and it was back in December last year, so it's almost been a year. And there's a link up in the top corner if you want to go back and refresh your memory on that one. Now this is the first of a multi-part series on the layout extension. So in this video here we're just going to do an introduction into what is about to unfold over the coming weeks and months as this extension actually gets underway. And today I'll be covering the actual plan that I've set up for the extension, and also some other curious little things that have cropped up over the last week or so. So I think probably without further ado, let's just get into it. So this was the original mock-up, which I had overlaid onto a photograph, and of course it reveals all the junk in the background as well. And if I go to the original photo, we can see the vast collection of games and boxes and bikes and a couch as well on its end. So we have now made progress in this area, as I've mentioned, and we now have the area looking like this. So we're getting there and starting to make preparations for this layout extension. So this is just showing the layout currently, albeit I'm missing a hidden siding which is roughly about here on this layout, but I'm not too worried about that. Now I actually use Rail Modeler Pro mainly because this is also available, it is available for Mac OS. Now the area in question is this area here, so it's a case of removing these tight radius corners here and extending out up this way. So if we switch over to the new layout, and we'll just zoom out a bit, and this is what we're planning on doing. Now it has changed a bit from my initial sort of thought. I was going to extend the line, so the grey panels of course are the existing baseboard, and the green is new baseboard. So essentially what I've done is the light coloured lines running around here are similar to what the original plan was. So that essentially removes that tight corner, which was roughly about here. Now, after some consideration, and as we know, almost a year of thinking about it, I wanted to try and figure out whether I could also at the same time build in some storage / fiddle yards. And this is what the plan is. So the yellow lines are a lower line which comes off from inside this tunnel and operates at the lower level, and thus I can get in some fiddle yards here. Now they're not vastly long, but they're sufficient enough to store a reasonable amount of trains. So we have, excluding the main lines, there will be 6 in total, 3 up and 3 down, and I think it's just going to make the operation of the layout it's just going to bring it up to another level. So if we just zoom in on this area here, and essentially what I've done is these 2 tracks on this end here used to curve around, and it was a double track that ran underneath, and it sort of revealed itself about here in a open cutting. Now the idea instead is to push these lines out from the existing baseboard add on a little wee extension here, and then run in and around underneath the main lines. So the yellow essentially will be all hidden. Now, one of the other aspects that sort of spurred me to add in this lower extension as well is around here where this existing curves are. If I go back to the existing layout, and you can just see the curves just run around through here. This is actually the up line, and it's actually a little bit steep, really. Some of my locomotives are not happy with this section through here, and it is a 1 in 30 gradient, so it is quite steep coming up through here. So by extending the lower section, my gradient will now start right back here, just after it exits from underneath the upper level lines, and the gradient will start here rather than starting about here somewhere where it currently is. So that's actually going to improve that area in terms of the gradient. So if we switch to the 3D view, and this sort of hopefully will give you an idea of how it works. So this light coloured track is all the upper level, and the yellow track is now going underneath. Now, where this single line is, I'm actually retaining one of those lines. That was a double track running through there in the original line, and I'm going to retain one and do another little bit of disused track for the second line, which is similar to what I've done in this area here. So the track now, instead of coming around this corner, it will now follow down through here and then go in and around underneath here, and this is where we have our fiddle yards underneath here. This area in the middle, I'm actually going to make this an access hatch, because I really need to be able to get in here to be able to reach these parts of the layout. And then of course on the upper level we now have 3 lines that are going to run around, and they follow through and back onto the existing track roughly about here. So with the extra line now that runs around here, this should hopefully create a little bit more operational interest, as I can still have 2 trains operating on the main double track line, but I can also run an end-to-end operation, possibly a DMU or some freight that can operate out of any of these sidings here, and run around on the third line, which runs around through the back. We've also got a connection there, and then that comes in to this set of yards here. So in a way, there is a combination of end-to-end with yards at both end, and then also a continuous loop at the same time. So with 2 trains operating and then also a third train operating, hopefully it will create a reasonable amount of interest and also operational value as well. So going back to that questionable incline which I just mentioned, this is that corner which will be actually realigned, and the track will actually push out through the back of the baseboard that you can see there. But before I decided to push the lower track level out into the extension as well, I did come up with this solution here. Somewhat cowboyish solution, I would say, which is kind of crudely based on the DCC Concepts power base system. So essentially I cut off strips of galvanized steel, quite thin material, and attach it to the track. Now, as you can see, it's inside the tunnel, so I thought, well, it doesn't matter if it actually sits on top of the rails, and unbelievably, it actually worked extremely well. So I'll just show you a wee demonstration, which I've got one of the troublesome locomotives, which was the Q1, and really this came down to the fact that it is a short wheelbase driving mechanism, so it was very much a victim to the incline. So what makes this all possible, of course, is the neodymium magnets that I have glued to the underside of the locomotive. And this is pretty much a very similar system to the DCC Concepts power base, where you get the metal underlay components that go into the track, and they supply you with the magnets that you attach to the underside of the locomotive. Now, these ones here, I just bought them from my local hardware store, so they're not ideal, but they definitely work. And I've also made sure that it is not glued over any screws that I need to access for servicing the locomotive. And I've also made sure that the thickness of the magnet is not hanging down so much that it won't clear any points. So there we go. That is the plans for the extension. I think over the next couple of videos I will be going through the process of assembling the actual framework for the baseboard, and I'll actually go through in some detail about how I go about creating the framework. Also, I'll include some details about materials used, even some costings as well, because I sort of feel like this will be really quite worthwhile for anyone maybe who's just entering into the model railway scene and sort of wants to get maybe some idea of what's involved, how much things cost, and also how to sort of go about building a framework without going too overboard with complicated or elaborate systems. So as we continue on with the series, there will be, of course, track laying, there will be scenery, and also electrics. So it's going to hopefully be quite an in-depth series. So hopefully this coming weekend will be the second video in this series, which will be beginning the framework assembly. So I'll leave it there for now. As always, take care everyone. Don't forget to like and subscribe. That way you'll receive a notification when the next video in this series pops up. So bye for now, and I will see you next time.